Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Danny Reed. I'm a Jewish educator and professional here in the Miami community and volunteer with the Miami Jewish Film Festival. And I'm really excited to be moderating this conversation with Michael Kretzmer, who is the director of ACCUSE, a unbelievably strong and powerful film about Lithuanian complicity in the Holocaust, and tells the story of one perpetrator in particular. So I do want to thank, of course, the Central Agency for Jewish Education for sponsoring Miami Jewish Film Festival and the Miami Jewish Film Festival for allowing us to speak and to bring this film to the attention of the Miami Jewish community. So Michael, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I wanted, there's several thoughts that as I was watching this course through my mind, and I mentioned to you prior to the beginning of the recording that this is very personal for me also, as having family Lithuanian Jews that were lost in the Holocaust. Most of my family was probably murdered in the Holocaust in Lithuania, but as I said, two thoughts went through my mind. One is that the language that you decided or that you used in the narration was extremely, almost brutal in its use of description, its description of what happened. But also that's one thought. The second thought was I thought of Father Patrick Dubois and his murder by bullet research, which is amazing. But what you reveal, it's especially in Lithuania, it's not so much murder by bullet, it's murder by neighbor. I mean, that's essentially what you're describing. So I'm asking two things. One is your choice of in the narration, your choice of language as you were writing the script. Was it purposeful to use such descriptive brutal language, or was that something that was discussed or decided upon, or was it very obvious?
Well, first of all, thank you, Danny, and thank you so much to the festival for allowing me a voice in this. I do regard it as extremely important on a number of levels. I took a decision to make my film as graphic as it needed to be, because I feel this is part of telling the truth. Now, I come from, originally my family comes from Lithuania, but then we went to South Africa. We're one of the lucky ones. And we grew up there in an atmosphere of ignorance, willful ignorance. And I think there was a very clear reason for that. If we had discussed the brutality of the Lithuanian Holocaust, it would have simply been impossible to move on. I don't believe it would have been possible to raise children with that degree of terror instilled into their souls. And whenever I'm asked to, I commend the valor, the raw courage of our parents and grandparents who lived through this and who saw the need to disguise from us this horror. There's another reason I wanted to use, I wanted to be absolutely honest in my depiction of what happened. And that's because the horror of this is often used as a means of silencing discussion of it, because frankly, nobody wants to go there. And the Lithuanian government uses this as a way of conditioning argument and presenting it in such a way that the one thing you never discuss is the terror itself. I went on a tour to Lithuania, and it was quite interesting in retrospect that the only thing we never ever discussed was what happened to us then. And that's the reason I wanted to include depictions of the horror. And also, it was to do with the language I used. It was very hard as a journalist to work out what voice to write this film in. Do I write it in the voice of the so-called all-knowing journalist? Do I do it in the British objective? Well, this is one side and this is the other side. And the only voice that mattered to me in the end was the voice of the children I depict on the poster of the film. It is their voice. And I say this from the first words of the film. I am giving them back their voice, and this is what they'd say. And I don't think anybody can question that that is indeed what they'd say.
Well, I want to go back to well, here's the second thing, if I can ask you. the whole concept of murder by neighbor, because there's the language that you're using, and then there's the motif of historical narrative, right? What is the truth that there's historical narrative and there's historical truth. What is the historical narrative that the Lithuanian government is dispelling and educating its youth in? And there's the historical truth which has been buried. And I go back to that concept of murder by neighbor. How did you try and balance those two things in the film?
I think one must be very precise about on the issue of Lithuanian guilt. Firstly, even at the most extravagant end of the claims, there were probably maybe 30,000 Lithuanian murderers. There were many more robbers. There were many more people who sat aside and watched, some with delight, some with horror. But we are talking about a few 30,000 people at its maximum. Mm-hmm. In the Great Melamed list, which purports to try and identify the killers, there are about 23,000 names. Another issue that must be taken into account is the Jewish and the general legal idea that guilt does not transfer intergenerationally. So the Lithuanian people are not guilty, and indeed they never have been guilty. Right. What the Lithuanian government is doing by choosing to lie and therefore honor a mass murderer as a national hero, they are making their own citizens complicit in this. And their narrative is simply that there was a communist Holocaust and there was a Nazi Holocaust, and poor old little Lithuania was stuck in the middle of and a victim of both. They even take our dead as a symbol of their innocence, which is outrageous given their behavior, particularly in recent years. I do feel sorry for Lithuania. This must be a terrible thing to have to come to terms with, when you know just in about every village there was a history of the most shocking slaughter and shocking cruelty. I don't blame them for wanting to forget this. And if they didn't try and sanitize mass murderers as their national heroes, I would wish them well in this. But the fact is, they have chosen to tell lies in history, to consecrate it with a government stamp of approval, and to inflict it on their people, and more importantly, to inflict it on the Jewish people. I see myself very much as an activist in the making of this film, rather than an artiste. Okay, all right. So, I mean, that would lead me to asking you, I think, how did you become involved? You mentioned that you're of Lithuanian Jewish descent. The narrative centers around a Jew of Lithuanian descent, and Sylvia Foti, who discovers her grandfather as one of the main perpetrators. Were you approached by one of them first, or did you just come across her book or his story? Okay, so I went to Lithuania in 2019, and to be honest, I think as an act of probably emotional protection, and because I'm a filmmaker, I took a camera and I watched the whole thing through the lens of this camera. Okay. And then I made a little film, and it was a film about our visit. And in retrospect, I'm quite proud of our visit. There was a bunch of Jews led by Abel and Glenda Levitt from Kfar Saba, who had this project to name the dead Jews of Lithuania. And in my own town of Biržai, where 2,400 people were murdered, our experts, which included Yad Vashem, were only able to name 550, which is, they even erased our names from the country and from the country's history. So on the basis of this film, which was I see it as a film that showed Jewish goodness, kindness, and peacefulness at an extreme. We went there and we accepted their pretend kindness and their pretend concern. But the more I examined what happened there, it seemed to me this was used by the Lithuanian, and they do this often, as a propaganda exercise. Now, I'd made this film, and on the basis of this film, which basically said, oh, isn't it great, Lithuanians joining us in commemorating our dead, a Lithuanian TV company offered me a chance to make a very grand documentary called A Letter to Lithuania. And as I started trying to write this documentary, the issue became clear. How would I depict the murder of our people? At that stage, there were already a number of very brave dissidents who were fighting the corner of truth, These are people like Professor David Katz of the Defending History website, Ephraim Zurich of the Wiesenthal Center, Ruta van der Geiter, and then I came across Grant and Sylvia. And so I went back to the people and I said to them, can I depict the Jews, the fate of the Jews in a truthful way, in the way I see as the truth? And they said, no, no. And then came out all this communist speak. No, we must rely on their experts, blah, blah, blah. At which stage I knew I was being governed by the Genocide Center, and I told them to get stuffed, and I made my own film. Another thing they did was offer me money the whole time. They kept trying to offer me money. Now, anybody who works in documentary knows that this never happens. Nobody offers you money to do this. And I believe, it is my belief they were doing this because they have this terrible idea that Jews will always accept money. It was itself an act of anti-Semitic violence, in my opinion.
Right. Sure, it sounds like they wanted to control, obviously they wanted to, through you, yes, control the narrative as well.
Correct.
Okay. So how did you meet up with Sylvia Foti and Grant Coach?
Well, I didn't. It was a COVID strangled world. There was no way of getting to America. Grant lives in LA. Sylvia lives in Chicago. So I started writing to them and WhatsApping them and talking to them on the phone and speaking, obviously reading all their material and above all, winning their trust. And they are two remarkable people. If I can just quickly give you an assessment, you'll have seen on the film, but Grant for over 30 years has been fighting alone through the courts of Lithuania the injustice of the Genocide Center and its perverted view of history. Sylvia is another matter entirely. She's an Eshet Chayil. She's a woman of such moral value. She was given the task of writing Noreka's hagiographic biography because she's his granddaughter. She inherited this task from her mother on her deathbed. Sorry, I know people will have watched the film, but can you imagine what it takes to go against your family, your culture, your people, and your country to tell the truth? And this is what she's done, and she's suffered enormously. So to have won that,
I can't imagine the strength of will that it took her to do that.
Mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing. And I have to say, Danny, I feel as Jewish people, we should have a moral sensibility, and I feel we have a duty to support Sylvia Foti. And I'm afraid I have to say that generally our so-called representative organizations have not done so.
Right.
Eventually they will have to, because they have to support truth over lies. But it's a shame it's taken a while coming.
Well, I'm curious, it's because, watching your documentary was the first time I'd even heard of her book. So I'm just wondering what response it was getting in general. And, and I'll be very curious to see what response your documentary is going to get, as well, because I think it's one of the, there are a lot of untold stories when it comes to the Holocaust and Holocaust scholarship. Right over the last few years, we've had all these books about the role of women in the Holocaust, which is just in the last few years is really, really coming to light. And I think that aspect of the perpetrators were not solely German. We know they had collaborators, but that especially in Eastern Europe, the murder by bullet was murder by neighbor and done by perpetrators really hasn't come to light. And I think, and also you have the governments such as Lithuania and others fighting that truth, right? Perpetrating their own narrative. I'm wondering if you in developing this film and producing the film and releasing it, did you encounter any resistance?
The only resistance I encountered were the machinations of the Genocide Center. And what Sylvia Foti has done has axiomatically driven a carriage and horses through their stupid arguments. They were never arguments in the first place. It's mythology, it's myth-making at its most perverted level. And I don't think Sylvia can be ignored by the Lithuanian government. Yes, they can ignore Grant Goshen and me and other people and David Katz and Ephraim Zurich and even Ruta van der Geiter, but they cannot ignore Sylvia Foti. And as you'll have seen in my film, she exposes the high level of anti-Semitism at the very highest level as a driver for their interpretation of historical truth. This cannot go on. If it does, we have to ask ourselves, firstly, does the Holocaust mean anything anymore? And secondly, does NATO and the EU mean anything more? If this is what member countries get away with, well, what exactly does it represent?
Well, you touched on something which I found very interesting, because I knew they were members of NATO and the EU. But you have the international theater, international diplomacy. How does that affect the relations between countries? And what standard can the EU and or NATO hold like a small country like Lithuania to? Does it really matter? Within 10 years, we had rehabilitated West Germany, to fight the Soviets. And I guess maybe I'm asking rhetorical questions, because we're seeing, maybe the response we're seeing is that, there's two different levels here. There's on the international scale, using Lithuania as one of the bulwarks against, expansionist Russia. But on the other hand, they have this horrible revisionist history that, contributes to anti-Semitism in the world and hatred in the world. And Michael, I don't know what the answer is. I think that your film helps reveal the truth, though.
Oh, it definitely does. And Sylvia Foti helps reveal the truth.
Right.
I mean, they chose Jonas, the Genocide Center, which is the lie factory of the Lithuanian government. They chose to make Jonas Noreika a hero. It's been known since the 80s what he did and what he was. They chose it because he's such a pin-up boy, I guess. I don't know. You'd have to ask them why. But they didn't count on his granddaughter telling the truth. And that's why they are in a terrible situation. And as for your other point, well, if the Western Alliance involves the overt commission of Holocaust lies, really, I would question its moral validity. And I'm sure many people would, and not just Jewish people. These organizations were born in the shadow of the Holocaust, and indeed were informed by the moral lessons of the Holocaust. Well, if this is what we've become, it's a pretty terrible state to be in, and I don't believe we are there. And I don't think it's difficult for Lithuania to face its past, just as Germany has had to. I would suggest that the dignity of Germany comes from its ability to tell the truth and its willingness to tell the truth. And I expect the same can be expected of Lithuania. Why not?
It's true. I'm curious as to whether, like, even to this day, to your knowledge, are they, is Jonas Noreika still lauded as a national hero?
Oh, yes.
They're refusing to, there's something that Grant Goshen said. I don't know if you were able to verify this, but he said that Jonas's booklet, anti-Semitic booklet,
yes,
is published by the Lithuanian military and disseminated to the recruits. Were you able to verify that?
I think what he said is that 2 years ago it happened that the booklet was used in the training of recruits to the army. I haven't done independent research. I've taken Grant at his word because Grant tells the truth. Again, like Sylvia, there's no reason for him not to.
Right.
But certainly, can you imagine any other country creating a hero out of a man who wrote their own national Mein Kampf? Because that's what Noreika did. It's staggering.
It is mind-boggling when you think of it. It truly is. What do you hope that this film will do? What would you like to see this film do?
Danny, that's such a great question. There are two things I want the film to achieve. One is I wanted to help the Jews to stand up for themselves and demand that this dishonor not be accepted. To stand up to Lithuania and say, this is unacceptable. No other people on earth would accept this insult, and it's about time the Jews did the same. Now, the second hope I have for the film is that it's redemptive, is that it enables the poor Lithuanian people who are imprisoned by these lies to actually see the truth, and all they have to do is say, we don't want a mass murderer as our hero. I know from the Jewish side, they would get nothing but a tide of warmth, but it's time to face the truth. And I hope there will be a redemptive angle to this, and that sufficient numbers of Lithuanian people will reject the lies of their government that incidentally has been going on for decades, and accept this invitation that the film makes to an open, honorable, kind, and truthful dialogue.
Do you think you'd be able to get this movie screened in Lithuania?
I so hope so. I so hope that Sylvia Foti is there as a hero of that country, and she's there to witness it. Do I think so? I'm afraid not.
Right.
I think decades of lives have taken a terrible toll on the soul of that country.
Right. Were you, I know with COVID the last couple of years, were you able to travel to the United States to interview Grant and Sylvia in person?
Such a great question. No, I wasn't. So I found this guy in New York, a lovely young guy, and he went there. I gave him the questions. He went to Chicago and he interviewed Sylvia. I was obviously present there in many ways because I'd gone through the questions with Sylvia. And with Grant was able to come to the UK, so I was able to film him here. I actually met Sylvia for the first time about 3 weeks ago in Chicago.
Oh, good.
And it was such a beautiful occasion. It was such an honor to be able to tell her to her face what she means to us and how much we value her contribution to this. As I say, I think she should be a hero of the Jewish people and the Lithuanian people.
True. I mean, can you, I'm sure some of the audience is curious about, you mentioned a little bit, but the reaction of the Lithuanian community to Sylvia. You know, how has she been dealing with that? And, what, I mean, in general, what has been the reaction of the community to her? I mean, is she still welcome?
No, I would say not. And there are people who are welcoming her, and there are people who are seeing her as the hero she is. But people have been so conditioned by the decades of lies that they are told to see her as a traitor, as somebody in the hands of the Jews, and all those stupid assumptions.
Right.
She's a religious, strong Catholic woman, and she will not budge, and no amount of hectoring or bullying will change her. She really is an extraordinary woman. And as my film makes clear, she has suffered absolutely extraordinary pain in the making of this, of her book, and in indeed what she says in the interview of my film.
You know, it takes an extraordinarily strong woman like that to stand up to your, not only to your family history, but your country's history, in a country that she so obviously still has these incredibly strong feelings for, that she loves.
Yes.
And you know, that pain comes through through as well. You know, there's one other topic I like to, I mean, there's a lot we could go on, but you know, you speak about in the film that whole process of how perpetrators actually came to the United States and other countries, I'm sure England and Australia, and created communities there. You know, is there anything more that you can elaborate in terms of your research on that? Because you also said that sometimes they were found out and there were attempts to repatriate them to Lithuania, and Lithuania refused.
Yes. Look, the way to summarize this scandal is to say not a single Lithuanian has ever been punished for anything that happened in Lithuania, even though we know hundreds of names. There are eyewitness accounts. 2 years ago, an extraordinary book was published. It was the testimonies of Koniachowski, Leib Koniachowski, a Jew who survived the massacre in Kaunas, Kovno, and then patrolled the DP camps in Old Shtetlach of Europe to find eyewitness accounts. He found 121 eyewitness accounts of the rural Holocaust in Lithuania. We know the truth of what happened now. It is time to work on the basis of that truth.
Right. The narrator that you found, very interesting stentorian voice. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what, you know, and that lends itself to the atmosphere of a documentary in keeping us motivated. Any words about this gentleman, like how you found him? And
his name's Jonathan. His name's Jonathan Taylor, and he lives in Johannesburg, and he has the most remarkable voice. Originally, I'd voiced it myself, but it was too emotional. You know, I could not keep my emotion out of my voice, and I'm not very good at that. And when I found John, who gives this dispassionate, clear, beautiful voice, I was so grateful for that. And I think he's done a magnificent job. And it's very kind of you to acknowledge this. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, it was a great choice, and it it lent itself, those first few sentences of the of your film, as I mentioned at the beginning of our interview, was almost shocking in terms of the graphic nature. And I said, oh my gosh, and of course the pictures that you chose to go with it. And I was like, oh my gosh, where is this film going to go? But his voice did not make it sensational. And it riveted you. So and caused you to pay attention and to listen to the narrative and listen to the script. So very well done. I think that was he was a great choice. Yeah, he really was.
But I would like to just add to the tragedy of the film, there's also the triumph of the film, don't you think? Mm-hmm. The fact of what our civilization in Lithuania was. And I uncomfortably, I have to say, produce a list of famous Litvaks, which is basically a roll call of modernity. The richness, the intellectual richness of our community, which strangely makes us quite quiet and bashful about because we're scared to be noticed. But I use this as an invocation to pride, that we should be proud enough to demand our honor. I don't think any other people in the world would accept the insult that the Lithuanian government offers us, which is, yes, we know he was a bad guy, but on balance, he was probably trying to help the Jews, blah, blah, blah. It's such rubbish.
Right.
But we accept it, and I don't understand why. We should be proud of what we are, and we should refuse these insults.
I wonder if many of Jews in diaspora Israel are even aware of Lithuania and how their and their narrative, is just, I hate to use the term whitewashing history, but their narrative is
it's exactly the word to use, Danny.
Is different. It's obfuscating, right? Yeah.
It's lies, Danny. It's lies. Right. If you look at Sylvia's story, it's lies.
Right.
If we look at Noreka, it's bullshit, all of us, and they get away with it, and I don't know why.
Well, part of it, I think, is what you reveal in the film, is that it's so embedded not only in the national narrative and self-identity of Lithuanians, and you have the government, you have the judiciary, right? Grant Gochin for 30 years, as you say. So the judiciary Lithuanian judiciary is protecting the narrative. It's all about protecting the narrative and educating the next generation of Lithuanians in this narrative. So for them, it becomes undeniable truth.
But worse, that truth has been accepted by our communities. Right. That's what they do is their business. But that false truth has been accepted by our community, where we suddenly accept it as, there are two sides to this. As Sylvia Foti shows, there are not two sides to this. There is one side to this, and that side is truth. And we have I think, a duty now to support that. If we don't, really, what is Holocaust education about? Can anybody make up a narrative to suit their own national ends? I don't think so.
Right. Well, that, I think, one last question is for you, you asked that question in the film, does the Holocaust still matter? So why, and I'm sure you get that question. I was a Holocaust educator at a Holocaust memorial here in Miami Beach for years. And as a Jewish educator, I deal with that question a lot, right? Why does the Holocaust matter? Why does learning about this matter? And so I'm going to ask you, if you can, as a closing question, why does the Holocaust still matter, and what role does this film play in that?
Well, I would say the Holocaust matters because it matters to all humanity. Mm-hmm. If we fail to recognize the lessons from that, then it's bound to happen again. But I go further than that. I say, as a Jew, it matters to us even more. And it distills around the question of honor. If we do not honor ourselves, then nobody will honor us. If we allow Lithuania to use these lies to create a bogus history and in the end to hero worship a mass murderer, then we have let our own people and our own selves down. That's my view.
Yeah, and I thank you for that. Can can you tell us, are you working on any other project, or are there any other projects that was this your first foray into making a Holocaust documentary, or has this inspired you to do other things, to look for other projects?
I was a filmmaker about 30 years ago. I worked for the BBC and I made sort of lots of documentaries. Then I gave it up. I had a business. 10 years ago, I retired. I went to grow vegetables on a little farm. That's what I do. I was brought back into filmmaking really by the insult of Noreka. But now, having done so, I did love it. And my next film, I wanted to be as different from Lithuania as it could possibly be. Something beautiful, something uplifting to the human spirit. So I want to make a film about Shabbat. And that's it.
Okay. Oh, very good. Well, we'll look forward to that. Maybe the next festival.
I hope so.
Well, listen, I do want to thank you so much for spending some time with us. And, you know, this is a film that I think this is a great film in addition to the Holocaust documentary canon. It brings to light something that you so eloquently state, that the truth needs to be told about this, and more of us need to know. And you know, there are a lot of Lithuanian Jews out there, or descendants of Lithuanian Jews. This is a part of our history, and we all, no matter how long ago we came to the States or England or any other, or Israel, we all had left family behind, and we all lost family, and their memory deserves to be treated with respect, and the history deserves to be remembered correctly. So thank you. I really do appreciate it. On behalf of all the members, the sponsors, and community partners of the Miami Jewish Film Festival and the Central Agency for Jewish Education, I want to thank you, Michael Kretzmer, the director of ACCUSE, for joining us today. And I wish you continued success with this film, and I really hope it does make an impact. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Danny, may I just say thank you very much? And just to point out that the American Jewish population has real power in this. Only they can change things. But thank you so much to the Miami Jewish Film Festival. I can't tell you how grateful I am to you.
Okay, wonderful. You best of success and success. And I look forward to that next documentary too.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all so much, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.